Formula 1 drivers have become hostages to the AI underpinning the 2026 power units, with results being decided by computers either behaving or misbehaving. Nowhere was this more exposed than at Spa. Everyone knew that this was the worst case scenario circuit for these regulations, as energy-starved 2026 Formula 1 cars mixed with long straights and high-speed corners is a painful combination. But the energy demands of Spa exposed a wider issue with the current rules that is more alarming for drivers, as they're fearing they're becoming a slave to algorithms that are deciding when and where to deploy energy around the lap. Those algorithms are forward-thinking and shifting around deployment based on predictions. Many drivers bit their tongue over the weekend, as they felt there was no point in keeping complaining like a broken record. Haas driver Ollie Behrman said on Sunday, "We get used to it and we deal with it and we know it's not going to change, so we're not going to complain about it every weekend." And some of you may be thinking the same. We already knew the 2026 rules are flawed. However, Spa was a big realisation for many watching of a major flaw with these regulations that has gone under the radar so far. Yes, there was the soul-crushing onboard of Kimi Antonelli's pole position lap, with the now all too familiar sound of superclipping, the engine sound dying down way before the braking zone, downshifts in high-speed corners, and the reduced challenge of previously great corners like Pouhon. But it exposed the reduced influence of the drivers in deciding the outcome of their weekend. That's because the super sensitivity of the current power units and complex rules relating to deployment highlighted how much drivers now seem to be hostages to self-learning algorithms. Big straight line speed differences across identical cars over the weekend often proved baffling for drivers and teams. Just look at George Russell's crisis of confidence at Spa, as he was almost brought to tears at how a mysterious straight line speed deficit was ruining his weekend. His Mercedes team estimated a power unit deployment problem into the bus stop chicane was costing him at least 0.2 of a second to teammate Kimi Antonelli. And a separate deployment issue out of the source for all Mercedes powered cars was a major contributor to Russell being swallowed by the pack on the Kemmel Straight on the opening lap and colliding with Lewis Hamilton. The problem is these issues are often only found after the sessions, so drivers have to toil with them, not knowing if it's their driving losing them time or an underlying issue out of their hands. Drivers are suffering through quirks of the machine learning algorithms that can't be predicted in real time. So there can be post-session explanations like too much wheel spin in one corner wasting energy, or a driver hitting more than 60% throttle out of a corner so they burn their battery there, and these tiny details are becoming even more influential and have overtaken the typical skills of being better and quicker through corners. McLaren's Lando Norris suggested there were too many random things, like happening to hit the boost button in the right place, deciding if a driver does well or not. Norris said there are way too many things now outside of the driver's control, and said sometimes it's just down to getting lucky that the power unit does what it should do instead of something silly. He says it's been costing him the whole year. Worst of all perhaps is the importance of self-learning computers that are being used to maximise the energy deployment around the lap. They help calculate how much power should be used where and when on the track, and they shift it around based on a host of parameters aimed at predicting how the lap will play out. It sounds like a very efficient way of doing things, but it is incredibly complex and has potential to go wrong, leaving drivers completely powerless to do anything about it. When teams talk about software problems, like that which befell Russell on the opening lap at Spa, or Oscar Piastri suffered in qualifying as he had a confusing top speed deficit to Lando Norris on the run to the final chicane, it is often these algorithms they are talking about. Piastri's McLaren team boss Andrea Stella explained that the power units are forward-thinking while being driven around the lap and constantly adapting to the inputs they get from the driver. Those inputs are never going to be identical from lap to lap, and also the simulations used to prepare them ahead of the weekend can't account for changes in wind, track grip, and differing inputs from the very human drivers. So teams are very much learning about how the power units are operating during the weekend, and sometimes can only spot issues when it's too late. Mercedes team boss Toto Wolff even admitted it was somewhat fortunate Russell's issue was spotted here at Spa, as it would be far harder to spot at an energy-richer Hungary. Russell could have simply sounded like a paranoid driver, when in fact he had a genuine issue with his power unit. It might make other drivers wonder if they too have an undiagnosed issue. It doesn't just affect a driver in a straight line either, because if a driver harvests more with a super clip before braking, then you can be braking 10 km an hour slower, so your braking point changes. In Stella's words, this is quite difficult to master for the drivers. Piastri spoke on behalf of several drivers after the Spa weekend, criticising the prevalence of the computer's influence on the power unit. He called it nuts and said he's spoken to other drivers who have a similar story to Russell's problems. He said, when you've got qualifying decided by computers behaving or misbehaving, it's a pretty crap way of going racing. What seems to annoy the drivers the most is that all their efforts to be quick in the corners and do a job in the arena where skill is supposed to shine are being wiped away by a computer deciding they cannot have power when they want it. It's a problem that has been in the background all season, and we understand some teams even turn these self-learning algorithms off for qualifying to avoid these kinds of issues. However, things can get super exaggerated at energy-sensitive tracks like Spa, where small percentages of battery difference translate to a lot of lap time. While these self-learning problems are not so prevalent at energy-rich tracks, so this issue is unlikely to rear its head at the Hungaroring this weekend, it does not mean the issue will go away totally. But what of the 2027 and 2028 power unit rule changes where F1 is going to do a two-step shift from the current 53-47 split between internal combustion engine and battery power towards 60-40 in 2028? That's going to ease some of the complaints to do with superclipping and downshifts in high-speed corners, but it's not going to take away the machine learning algorithms. As Piastri said, the same computer systems and self-learning tools are going to be present on the cars, no matter how much extra fuel is being pumped into the engine or how much energy is available. He does think it will get better when the manufacturers understand the engines more, as there's still so much to be learned weekend to weekend. Hence the current difference between the factory Mercedes team's exploitation of its power unit and customer McLaren's understanding. Just look at the Mercedes qualifying trick we revealed at Silverstone that caught everyone, including McLaren, by surprise, as Antonelli and Russell were unusually lifting off before the line, something they also did at Spa. There's bound to be more tricks that emerge, as there's so much the teams still don't know about these power units and how the autonomous parts of them think and forward plan. Whether F1's chiefs share the drivers' concerns about things remains to be seen, but you can't imagine fans are going to like knowing how much influence is outside of the drivers' hands. After all, F1 is all about the drivers. But in 2026, it's never been harder to actually tell who's doing the best job. Has one driver out-qualified another by 2/10 on merit, or is there simply a weird self-learning algorithm quirk that denied a driver deployment on a particular straight? Was that an amazing pass into Eau Rouge Radion I've just witnessed, or is it simply the algorithm deciding to save that energy so a driver can easily get the position back on the Kemmel straight? F1 risks robbing F1 drivers of their star power, and knowing a popular switch to V8 engines isn't going to happen until 2031 most likely, could leave everyone with 4.5 more years of this. Nobody wins if the drivers stay hostage for that length of time. After all, the sporting regulations have long carried an important clause that has got rid of many driving assists in the past. Article B181 states the driver must drive the F1 car alone and unaided. Given that forward-thinking algorithms are deciding important results right now, it's hard to see how that regulation isn't being strained to its limit. The drivers would love nothing more than actually being able to drive the F1 cars alone and unaided. But right now, qualifying and races are being too heavily influenced by self-learning computers, not drivers.